Everybody can hear me? Right on. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for coming out. This is a wonderful turnout, so thank you very much for coming out to the Billings Public Library programs. It means a lot to us when people show up, so thank you very much. My name is Joe, and I'm a librarian here at the Billings Public Library. My colleague and I are very happy to do a lot of the art-related programming for the library, and we're extremely happy to be bringing to you today Amy Lynn Nelson and Larry Meyer, who we've developed a relationship with over the last couple of years, and we're very happy to know as well as we do. So I'm going to give you just a quick overview of how we know Larry and Amy, why it is that we're aware of them, and why we're hosting them today. So we first met, I think, back in about February of 2022, when the library got a grant from the Montana Memory Project, now known as the Montana History Portal, to digitize the library's fine art collection. So I was shopping around for a photographer who could actually do that for us, and I was bouncing here and there. I think it was finally Photographic Solutions who said, you might want to contact Larry Meyer. He might be interested in this. So I did. I contacted him. I reached out. He said, I am not the guy for that, but I do know the person who might be interested, and that's when he put me in contact with Amy. So, and then he said, what the heck do you mean also about this fine art collection? Since I didn't know that the library had a fine art collection. And so that kind of started the ball rolling on bringing it, the awareness to the public about the fact that we do have one. We're rather proud of it. So this is what we did. This is what Amy did, I should say. This is on the Montana History Portal. There's the library's Russell. There's our Joseph Sharp collection. You can always go in here and take a look at it anytime you want in beautiful high quality. Obviously you can zoom, so I zoomed out on accident by doing that. But it's, yeah, a really wonderful, I'm gonna go the other way on that. Sorry, wonky mouse. Really wonderful repository of historic documents and paintings, stuff like that. So now, because of Larry, because of Amy, and working together with them, we now have that on that website for you to look at whenever you want, which we're very proud of as well. Since then, we were happy to host Amy for the February 2023 Art Walk, where we got to see her personal photography collection, what she does as a freelance photographer. Once again, very proud to honor her for that and welcome her into the Art Walk space with us. And then as time went on, we kind of like went off with that. It's kind of weird because we now know Larry, we now know Amy, but we're not actively programming with them, and yet every single day when I put the papers out, I see their work every day. So I'm in the library putting out the morning gazettes, and there's, for example, say like a roaring ocean of floodwater in Red Lodge, and I look down and I see the words Amy Lynn Nelson. So I know that my friend is in Red Lodge, 20 yards away from this tsunami of water. We see the spy balloon. Well, we all know that story now. We look down on the caption, we see Larry Meyer. So that prompted my colleague and I to say, this profession of theirs is so intriguing, it's so unique. How the heck does it work? Who decides who goes to what job? And are you sitting by the scanner every night? Like, how do you show up, within the hour when what happens at the Billings Country Club happens, and Amy's there literally within an hour? How does that world work? So as we became interested, kind of like, reaching out into these questions, it really just kind of crept up that it might be a program that you would all enjoy to hear from their mouths. So I'm going to stop and leave it at that. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out today. And please, let's give a warm welcome to Larry Meyer and Amy Lynn Nelson.
Well, thanks for coming, everybody. I just thought I would sort of run through a couple of things. One, how the job works, and I've been at the Gazette since 1977, and so it'll be the start of my 46th year here in December. And one story I like to tell is that there was a New York street photographer who's called Ouija, and when he was asked about these amazing pictures that he took in New York City, he said it's it's all about F8 and be there. F8 is just a setting on a camera and being there. That's the most important thing. And so what working for the newspaper all these years has allowed me to do is to be at lots and lots of different locations. And that's the only way that you can get, you know, pictures of events, the historical events that happen in our community, and then run-of-the-mill events also. There's just a lot of really simple things that we photograph every day here. And I ran through just a list of the some of the things that I've done in the last 2 weeks. And just so that you know how it sort of works is, we come in the morning. There'll be a schedule maybe that's been set up for a couple of weeks of upcoming events that we plan on covering. Both sporting events. I mean, it could be advertising things that I have to photograph. And then we meet in the morning and try to figure out which of those events we're actually going to photograph, if we can get somebody to those things, or if it is going to require travel. So over the course of the last 2 weeks, I've photographed trick-or-treaters, a Rocky Mountain College art project, a volleyball tournament, holiday decorations, a feature story on a great basketball player, the Native American Heritage Run, construction on the underpass, Riverstone Health's hospice tree, the Gazette's gift guide section. Just now I walked over here from a rally for Palestine, which was on the courthouse lawn, a new teepee going up at the museum at the airport. And incredibly, in the last 2 weeks, I've been to 4 homicides in Billings. It's unbelievable. I've just never seen anything like that. So, you have those day-to-day events that we go to, and then some things that are scheduled, some that aren't. There's breaking news things that happen, and we scramble to get to those if we hear about them. I've got an older gentleman who's handicapped, and he listens to scanners for me. And so I can't always have a scanner around that I can listen to, so I know when events are happening. And so he does that for me, and I pay him with Swisher Sweet cigars.
It's a true story.
Yeah. And so then, we'll have these events going on, little things that we're covering in our community. And then every once in a while, something big will happen that creates, that becomes a national story, like the Yellowstone fires in 1988, or the Freeman thing, or the Unabomber. I was at all of those things. I took pictures at all of those events. And then this last February 1st, this balloon floated over Billings. And I'll just go into a little bit of detail about that one event. The airspace around Billings closed. And so I've been flying for 40-some years now. I'm doing a lot of flying for the newspaper. But I have lots of friends who are pilots. And so right away, when they started shutting down the airspace, I started getting phone calls from pilots saying, "Hey, I just got diverted to Bozeman. The airspace, the Billings Airport is closed. There's a notice put out that a giant closure of airspace was going to happen from Cook City all the way to Billings. And so what's going on?" I didn't know what was going on. And so I ran up to the airport. I took a picture of the airport, being shut down, and all these people waiting for flights that weren't going to arrive. And I took a picture while I was up at the airport. I could see these contrails in the sky that were going in circles. And so I took a picture of that. And I went back to the office and posted a story online that the airspace was closed and nobody was saying why. I started making phone calls to everybody I could think of. The FAA in Seattle wouldn't tell me anything. They said it's not our deal. Finally, thankfully, the governor's office put me in touch with somebody at the Air National Guard. And he said, it's not our deal, but call NORAD, which was a fabulous tip because I got a hold of the PR person at NORAD who said, we're preparing a response, but they wouldn't tell me what was going on. So that about that time, I get a call from a friend who says, gosh, I was just walking out to my car and there's this little thing in the sky just to the left of the moon, and so I don't know what that has to do with the airspace closure, but it's something, right? So I was in my car, I jumped out with my longest telephoto lens and took pictures of the balloon. But we still didn't know, what that had to do with the airspace closures, if anything. I didn't even we didn't have any idea. And but so I the guy at NORAD actually said, well, what are you going to do with the pictures? I said, well, I'm going to post them. He said, well, we're kind of preparing a response. And I said, well, I'm going to post the pictures like right now. Why don't you tell me what it is? And they didn't get back to me. They had a press conference the next afternoon at the Pentagon and told everybody what the balloon was. But by then the pictures were out there, and Pat Ryder, the general who's in charge of media relations, walked up to the podium and said, yes, I've seen the pictures. And so it was awesome just to, because I honestly don't think they probably would have told us. And since then, I've gotten pictures from other people who have photographed those balloons in other places. One up by Lewistown, a guy who was kind of a sky watcher, took a picture of one 2 years ago. So they've been around for a while. It just took sort of forcing the government to tell us what it was. And if I didn't have the voice of the big reach of putting the picture on the Gazette's website and getting it out there everywhere, if I was just a amateur photographer and I'd photograph this thing, it wouldn't have had that impact, right? So it really helped to have that sort of reach. And I'm glad that whole thing happened. After that, I was interviewed a dozen times, and I was on TV and all this stuff. And in one of these interviews with an Australian drive time radio station, these guys said, hey, well, when they make a movie about this someday, who do you want to play you? And I said, Tom Cruise. And the reason for that is, and if you want to hear it later, I'm not going to play it here because it's vulgar, but back in 1992, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman were making a movie in Billings called Far and Away. And and somehow during the course of this thing, Cruise got the idea that I had taken pictures at the set, like paparazzi kind of pictures. But I was covering the state pro-am golf tournament in Laurel. I wasn't even there. And so he sent these people, his security people, to the newsroom, and they asked all kinds of questions, about these photos, which didn't exist, and they wanted to see the film, our film take for the day. I mean, the whole thing was crazy. So when I got back, there was a vulgar message from Mr. Cruz. He was really upset, but it's totally a case of mistaken identity. I'm sure there was somebody there taking pictures, but it wasn't me. So anyway, that was super fun. And I kept that tape, so if you want to hear it afterwards, I'll play it for you. So this is Amy Nelson. I'm going to let her talk a little bit. She's brand new. She's just, been at the newspaper for a short time, so she can maybe tell you a little bit about, what it's like to be a new person on the job. So thank you.
Hi, yeah, I'm Amy. So I originally started at the Gazette in 2019. I was an intern for 3 months, and then I came back as staff at the end of 2022, and I've been around ever since. So a little bit about me. I'm originally from Glasgow, Montana. In high school, I worked at the local newspaper as a photo intern. I was just doing photography on the side. I was 14, 15 years old, shooting sunsets and outdoors and night skies. And the editor of the local paper found me and said, "Hey, would you like to do an internship?" And at the time, I didn't really have any interest in being in journalism, but I thought it would be great to be employed as a photographer, so I gave it a shot. So I did that for a couple years, and then I graduated in 2016, and I went to college in Bozeman for pre-law and political science. My goal was always to go to law school. And in my third year of college, I was working at the college newspaper, The Exponent, working as their lead photographer, covering, mostly sports, but the occasional breaking news events and stuff on campus. And I was on a mission trip in San Francisco when I got a random Facebook message from Larry. We'd never met before, and I'd seen Larry's name before, but I wasn't familiar with the face. And essentially, the message said, "Hey, I'm looking for a summer intern at the Billings Gazette. Can you give me a call?" I ended up calling Larry. I was on the subway in San Francisco, and he said, "Hey, if you're interested, you can come work for me this summer in Billings." And at the time, I had already accepted an internship at the Bozeman Chronicle, but I knew that coming to Billings would be a better opportunity. So I came here in 2019, and within a week of moving to Billings, I loved it. I loved the opportunity. I loved the news that came here. I loved the sports opportunities. So after my internship finished that summer, I actually decided to finish out my college career here in Billings and stayed. During COVID, I went back to Glasgow for a little over a year. And then as soon as a full-time job opened up at the Gazette, I came back as staff. And I think the really amazing thing about this job is that it's allowed me to, not only be a part of the community, but document events that, I wouldn't otherwise see. Like Larry said, what this job does is it allows you to be at things and events that you normally wouldn't get the opportunity to be a part of, and you get to document those for the community, and I think that's really important. And I think a huge highlight for me in the last 2 years has been covering the Red Lodge floods. Early in 2022, Larry and I were kind of, tracking the snow, looking at, you know, um, how much moisture was in the area, and we had, predicted that there would probably be some flooding, but we never could have, predicted what was to come. And I think, being able to be there and document those images was a really important thing, and it allowed us to, put history on the record. And I think that's really what this job has allowed for us. Um, I only have a few years of experience in journalism, and Larry has 40 plus. And it's been really great, being able to learn from Larry and just learn all of the things that you could only learn over a lifetime in photography. So I'm really appreciative of that.
You mentioned, half of the job is just being at the right place. If I'm interested in finding interesting subjects, there's kind of a little bit of an imposter syndrome going on. Like, if I want to be on the sideline of like a college football game, for example, or in the pit of a concert, for example. I don't have a publication or a press pass or anything like that. Are there good ways for just an amateur photographer figuring out his camera, figuring out the craft of creating an image, how to get on that football sideline, how to get in that concert pit, that kind of thing?
Yeah, the football stuff is they just continuously crack down on who they allow. It's a little crazy because at some of the events you'll have 12 moms, but you have to fight to get a pass, And Amy can talk to you about concerts because she's the concert person. So.
Yeah, I love concert photography. And in terms of the football stuff, I actually have a good example of that. So when I was going to college in Bozeman, I worked for the college newspaper. And even before I got that job at the college newspaper, I, wanted to do photography of the Bobcats. So, and I had cheaper camera gear, just a starter kit at the time. And what I did was I would shoot photos from the stands, and I would post them on social media, and I would send them to news outlets in the area and say, hey, this is my photo. If you want to use it, you're welcome to. And that actually led to me becoming the official photographer for the Bobcat Cheer Squad, which eventually led to me being on their athletic staff and doing photography for them, along with the newspaper job. So I think, like Larry said, a lot of it is just being there and also trying and getting your work out there and really working those connections. I'll say that connections are the biggest thing in photography. So yeah, and in terms of concerts, they are a little more strict, but a good recommendation would be to talk to the venues and talk to a marketing manager and see if they can get you in touch with someone.
Yeah, and sometimes at those things, if you can like offer your images up, like for instance, if the ABT, yes, say, if you can get me in to shoot this show, I'll give you some images. Sometimes that really helped out. Yeah. Yeah.
Go to photography school specifically to learn photography, or did you just learn it?
No.
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 I took one black and white photography class in college, and I hated it, so I dropped the photo program and did pretty well. So, yeah. My college professor, the head of the photo program at Bozeman, actually told me, he's like, never take a black and white photograph. You're not any good at it, but I have faith that you're going to do well in digital photography. And later that year, I was named one of the top 50 photographers in the world in the Sony World Photography Awards, which is the biggest photography competition in the world.
I was curious if you miss maybe not the process, especially for what you do, but or the look of film.
Not really, because I spent so much time in that darkroom. And here's one really sad thing that's started to happen is these old photographers like me have started to die of pancreatic cancer. And because we never wore masks or gloves, or back in the day, I mean, you're just like, bathing in that stuff when you're in the darkroom. So yeah, not I don't care. Would never go back to doing film again. So
We handed that off to somebody at the Gazette.
no, we did all here. We used to have 8 dark rooms at the Gazette. Yeah.
The number on the photography staff, is that 10 years ago?
Yeah, so as the print edition of the newspaper has declined, like all newspapers in the country. I mean, it's we're down to, it's just Amy and I are the 2 photographers at the Gazette now. There used to be 6 of us. And we had a book publishing company, and it was just a different world back then. I used to spend $50,000 a year just on film, which we would never do today. Yeah. Yeah.
Rotate day and night activities, so when you can get some sleep.
Well, you do until something comes up. Like last night, I was out late because we had yet another gang-related shooting on the South Side, and then this morning I got a tip that there was a SWAT team raid taking place on the South Side, right by South Park. So I raced down there at 7 a.m. and got an awesome picture of a guy being taken out of a house by the SWAT team wearing boxers and an ankle bracelet.
12-13 hour day happens, and you have to be there. So it's a pretty inconsistent schedule, but it's worth it.
So the difference between film photography is you take a picture and that's the picture. With digital photography, there's opportunities to modify the picture, to Photoshop the picture, to change it, to adjust it, and so on. What do you think that has done to, I guess, the photography profession and the historic value of pictures when they can evolve now and they couldn't before?
Right. Yeah. So that's an interesting question, because we have rules that we can't change anything in an image outside of what we used to be able to do when we were printing them, which was we could make them lighter or darker. You can burn and dodge a little bit, so you could lighten up an area or darken an area. Say somebody's face was really dark, you could lighten that up a little bit. But that's all that we can do with them. And so I see pictures all the time, and it's getting harder and harder to tell because the technology's so good now. I see pictures all the time that are obviously not real, and it's very frustrating. I mean, that picture of mine of the Grand Prismatic Spring, a lot of people online said when that picture was first published, it was shot actually for a calendar company, and that was a buddy of mine flying over the spring. I shot that spring 10 times as we an aerial photos of it as we set that deal up, to get on the cover of this calendar called the supercubs.org calendar, which was just there's no money in it. It was just a really cool thing to have it on the cover of this calendar, and they did posters and whatnot. So that was a very elaborate photograph, and to think that you could just do it, with Photoshop, is cheating, because we had to. I took I think around 230 or 240 pictures to get that one, right? And we had to, it took so many runs at it to get it right over the center of the spring that we had to fly back to West Yellowstone and get more gas. So, and the other thing that was interesting about that is photographing the spring at different times of day, trying to get it right, trying to get the light and the color as good as I could. It was super interesting to learn two things. One, that the colors were the most vibrant when the sun was directly overhead. So we shot the picture on the longest day of the year, and it was also much more vibrant if it was hot. So we waited until noon on the hottest day of the year, and it was like 85 or 90 degrees or something like that. And that's because there wasn't as much steam. So you've seen lots of pictures of Grand Prismatic Spring, and a lot of them from the air. But if there's the steam obscures a lot of that color, you don't see down into those deep blues that are down inside the spring. So I'm sure it was super annoying to the poor people that were in the park that day, because yeah, Bev.
So speaking of setting things up, do you remember the April 1st picture?
Yes.
You had a rock with a snow snake on
Yes,
it.
yes. So
Yeah, and I
so-
said, Larry, what kind of a creature is that? Like,
yeah. So back in the day, Mark Hinkle, who some of you guys might remember, is very, very good sports writer. He decided he wanted to write an April Fool's Day story, and I wasn't real excited about it, but I went along with it. And so he took these little plastic snakes and spray painted them white, and had me take a picture of them up on the rims. And then he did the story about how they were, there was all this research being done about snow snakes. And I actually got calls from people on April Fool's Day that said, "Oh my God, I am never going on the rims again. I had no idea." Yeah.
Earlier, you used the word cheating when you talked about the abilities with the computer now.
Yeah.
Okay. Back in the day, as you know, you took a picture at a certain shutter speed.
Yeah.
As you know, now you can take 6, 8, 10, 12 frames per second. So essentially, you're taking a movie and then picking a frame out of that movie. Can you compare and contrast covering a sporting event in those two different abilities?
Yeah, well, so the pictures that I shoot today are much better because I could shoot more frames. I mean, when I could only shoot one frame, and I could only shoot, because of the processing time, I could only shoot one roll typically. Like when I went to a nighttime basketball game back in the day, because I had all that processing time. Now we can just put it in the computer and put it online and get it ready for the print edition. there was a lot of time. The thing that's really disappointing is because we have, we don't have as much staff as we used to have, and it's difficult to get something in the print edition. Obviously, you can always go on the website and it's everything's super up to date. I mean, you can go look at the pictures I just shot a few minutes ago over at the rally on the courthouse lawn, right? But I used to be able to walk into the newsroom at midnight if it was really an emergency, like we had an explosion at the refinery in Laurel once back in the day, and still get a picture in the morning newspaper, which you could never do today, even with all of the computer technology. It's just not possible anymore. So, and maybe you could talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. No. Having shot, a little bit of film, I have, definitely an understanding of, the limitations of how many frames you can take on film. And I will say that digital photography is a blessing. When I started, like I said, I was 13, 14 years old. I just had a little digital camera. It was probably a $50 camera. And I remember, trying to shoot, action photography and sports with that camera and feeling the limitations of that. And, as I made my way through high school and saved up for better gear, I could definitely see the improvement in my images as I was shooting with a better and faster camera. But I think the one thing I will say that's most important about any action-involved photography is the ability to anticipate what's going to happen and knowing when to pull the trigger or push the trigger on the camera. I think really that's the most important piece, and I think that's what, makes a really good action or sports photographer. And I do think absolutely that, having that better technology is definitely, a huge benefit for us. And I personally, I'm not a fan of film. I mean, I can appreciate it for what it is, but having nice digital cameras is a blessing, and that's definitely the route I want to continue on.
By the Gazette.
Yeah, so the Gazette, we just got some new Canon cameras that the corporation bought, but historically, the company provided the bodies and the photographers have their own glass because everybody wants a little bit different glass, right? So, and the company would pay us this little lease. I think it's like $62 a month or something, a little lease. So over the course of, you take really good care of that stuff over the life of that little lease thing, then you can pay for those lenses. And so it's difficult to make that transition now. I've always been a Nikon guy. And so the new stuff that the corporation bought is Canon, and I don't have any glass.
It's mirrorless, and we shoot just Lars, so that's
right. And so it's a difficult transition, and I haven't, I'm not very good at change at this point in my life. So, right.
Lens, what range of focal lengths do you find yourself using more often than others, or do you have different bodies?
I've got a 17 to 35 that I use a lot for just like the breaking news stuff, because I like to be like in as close as I can get if I can be really close, so you sort of eliminate the possibility of, things getting in your way. Obviously, like all the stuff I shot during that SWAT raid this morning was with a 500, because you can't get close. You're two or three blocks away. So, yeah.
Well, I imagine you've had some near-death experiences.
Yeah, a few. Yeah, some airplane-related stuff, and then just some. I can't think of a most memorable. Flying during the Yellowstone fire got pretty Western a few times. There's been some flying that I've done where there were bad storms that were, not very much fun. Yeah, I don't know. I've been threatened a lot, over the years. People, don't want to have you take pictures sometimes, and so, some, people threaten you. Just 2-3 weeks ago, downtown on a Sunday afternoon. I mean, just never know. It's crazy.
Do you ever have to get permission from the people you are?
So, it depends. Obviously, if the event that I'm shooting is on private property, then I have to ask. But if I'm shooting from public property, then I always just shoot first and ask questions later, because I don't want to have somebody tell me no, right? So I'm gonna make sure I have the picture first, and then I might go get their name and ask them if it's okay if I use it or whatever. But I'm gonna make sure that I have the picture. Yeah.
Do you use tripod much anymore for your nighttime shots?
Oh
with
yeah,
digital?
for nighttime stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I still carry one in the car with me all the time. I've got this kit in the car with a set of off-camera strobes and with radio transmitters and tripods, a monopod, and so yeah, I use some of that stuff still. Yeah.
Actually much Photoshop, or are you just kind of taking as is, it's straight out of the camera?
We use Photoshop to clean them up a little bit. I mean, like set the color and you can lighten them or darken them a little bit, within those boundaries that I talked about earlier. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you own your pictures that you take for the Gazette? Or
No, the Gazette owns them.
You do your own pictures though? And
Yes. Yeah. I do my own pictures, and I run a little moonlighting company doing aerial photography for like companies, so I'll do like mining aerials and I do a lot of work for the Bureau of Reclamation, when they've got flood stuff going on, they always want to see what the impact of all that is. And so I used to do a little bit of real estate stuff, but mostly that's done with drones now. And I sort of thought that when the whole drone craze got going, that a lot of that aerial photography would go away, but it really hasn't been the case. People ask me all the time if I do drones, and I tell them, well, not really. My drone weighs 2,600 pounds. And I'm not interested in the little ones. Yeah. Yeah.
You said that at the Gazette they have pretty strict rules about photo editing. What do you think about photo editing in your own personal photography if you're taking your own art-like photos? I mean, how far would you go? How far is too far to go and still call it your photo?
Right. So, yeah, I follow the same rules with my own stuff. Now, when it comes to a client's work, say that I'm doing a picture for an advertising client or whatever, and they want the background of this picture taken out. So that doesn't, I'll do that for them, because that doesn't really matter to me if it's an advertising client. I have bristled a little bit. A couple years ago, I got a call from actually the Chamber of Commerce, and they wanted to use one of my pictures, but they wanted to take out part of the Conoco refinery. And I'm like, absolutely not. And here's the reason. Because those three refineries, the stockyards, and those industries, the sugar beet plant, those industries that are in Billings, are the only reason this town's here, right? And I really, was upset by that. I mean, I just, not going to happen. With, they can take their own picture if they want to do that. So, yeah.
It seems pretty well established that the Gazette for decades has had the best photographers in the state, and clearly that's still true today. How do you do it? How do you maintain having the best photographers in the state for decades and decades?
Well, I just try to hire people that are better than me. And, I've been really successful at doing that over the years. And so I've had, I've had lots of photographers that worked for me that were way better photographer than I am, especially at specific things like sports, where maybe I didn't have as much interest as some other people might have. And so, yeah, I'm not jealous of that work. I just hope that they, get really good images and we get them in the newspaper. Yeah.
do you still have strong battles with editors over how your photos are used, or nobody's editing?
Well, not really. Sometimes we have discussions, but we have this online venue, so the images can just go online. And back in the day, we would have, pretty heated discussions about an image that somebody thought was too sensitive or whatever, because that was the only time it was going to run if it was made in the print edition, right? And so now it can go online, and it still gets seen by lots and lots of people. So that's really changed. Yeah. Favorite things I've shot for the Gazette? Well, I guess those big news events, just being able to be at some of those big news events over the years, probably been the best for me anyway.
Yeah, I would definitely say, some of those bigger news events. I found that, covering the Red Lodge floods was really impactful for me. It really changed my perception, not only on how natural disasters affect people, but it kind of gave me an insight into how public infrastructure works at the federal, state, and local level, and how that directly impacts people. So that was a really important one to me. In July, I photographed the deck collapse at the Briarwood Country Club, and that was tragic, but again, it kind of gave me insight into what an event looks like and what the impacts are for not only the people involved, but the place involved. So.
Do you have a favorite person that you've shot that would have been like a hero?
I've shot a lot of celebrities over the years. I can tell you one story. I got an assignment once for Time magazine to photograph Peter Fonda in Paradise Valley, right? So they give me his phone. This is pre-cell phone. So they give me his phone number. I call him up, and he said, okay, he says, we can do it Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. You've got 10 minutes. Or 15 minutes or something, he said, to do this picture. And well, I'm originally from Livingston, so I said, okay. He was a little taken aback because I said, okay, meet me at the top of Trail Creek Pass. And he was going to be on his Harley. It had to be a picture of him on his Harley because the story was about how he was on the board of directors of Harley Davidson. So I hired an assistant, and we set up a generator and all this lighting gear. This was on film, of course, and he, pulls up on his Harley Davidson. I snapped this picture of him, just like literally one roll of film. And he says, okay, he says, and then we exchanged a couple of words, and he said, okay, well, follow me, back to the house. So I throw all the stuff in the car, and I follow him back to his house, which was really surprising because it was like a little cabin with a wood cook stove up Deep Creek in Paradise Valley. And, so we sat there, and his wife made some coffee, and she had some cookies going, and then he started telling stories, and he's just like going on and on and on with these stories. And finally, I look at my watch. I said, I have to make this FedEx drop in Billings. I got to go. It was odd because he said I had like 10 minutes of his time, right? And so then I said, I just have one question for you. I said, after the movie Easy Rider, you kind of disappeared. And so I just sort of, for a couple of years, you weren't, we just expected you to be out there everywhere, like on talk shows and whatever. And he said, well, he kind of laughed, and he said, well, here's the deal. He said, they had no money to make that movie. And so my dad talked me into not taking any money for the movie, but just taking a percentage of the profits. Well, it turned out it was a hit. He made gobs of money, and his buddies talked him into buying a sailboat, and they sailed around the world. And I said, wow, what an adventure. And he said, yeah, it'd be even better if I remembered any of it.
What role does video take in your job? How do you determine whether you're going to be taking video or still pictures and what's used?
Well, so if we're shooting an assignment that is going with an actual story, it's a little complicated when you're shooting an assignment that's just going to be a feature photo on the website, right? But if it's going with a story, we try to shoot a video. I'm not as good at it as I should be, and so that gets attached to the story. And so there's been quite a bit of pressure in the last few years to do more video. To be honest with you, I'm not terribly interested in it because nobody ever has come to me and said, "Wow, that was an awesome video you made." So. Yeah.
So hypothetically speaking, let's say you take time off and you're on vacation. Probably doesn't happen a lot. Are you always shooting? Is it hard for you to put the camera down? Because it's really kind of gets in your blood, right?
Yeah, I always carry a camera with me everywhere. Yeah.
How about you, Amy?
Yeah, I always have a camera on me for sure. Yeah, I think it's really important. And it's great how good, cell phones have become with their camera technology, but I think it's really important to still have a camera on me, so I always have one.
Have you used your cell phone for a picture if you didn't have time to set up?
Yeah, I have, and fairly recently, just because I wasn't close to my car where my gear was, and so yeah, I have. And as they get better, eventually we might do a lot more of that. I thought about actually like doing a class sometime just on because, the basics are the same. It's about being in the right place at the right time and the lighting, and so the basics are the same. I thought about maybe someday doing a little class just on how to take better pictures, whether it's with your cell phone or a camera. Yeah.
Yeah, so until I, came back to the Gazette at the end of 2021, I was doing a lot of freelance photography. And I still do some hobby photography, but as I've gotten deeper into this job, I've found myself doing more and more stuff for the newspaper. But every once in a while I have to remind myself like, oh, hey, it'd be great if you went out and shot the northern lights or a sunset just for yourself. So I think that comes with any profession. When your passion is your job, it can be kind of hard to balance that. But I just like to keep in mind that photography is important to me too. And some of the photography in this slide is some of my freelance photography. A lot of the northern lights stuff, a lot of the star photography, sunsets, that kind of thing is just stuff that I've shot on my own time. A big goal for myself is to continue to do more of that in my free time.
So how often does the journalistic side play into it? You guys are out there taking the shots and taking the pictures for the Gazette. How often do you have to actually write the copy? How does that process kind of work?
So we write the captions for the photographs, and a couple of things I really haven't spent any time writing. I'm terrible at it, so it's a good thing. Okay. Yeah, so I don't really write much of anything except the captions. Amy has done a little bit, but yeah.
So it can be a little complicated, but there are times when we don't necessarily have a reporter covering a story and we just cover it with photos. And in those cases, we tend to kind of do our own little write-up in the body copy, which could be considered a story. It's just not nearly as long as what a traditional reporter would write. But as Larry was saying, with all of the photos that we publish, we do write the caption that's on those, and then those, of course, go to our copy desk, and we have a copy editor review those before they actually go in print. I've written a couple stories. I wrote a housing story, a story about buying my own house a year and a half ago, and that was featured in a national housing package. So that wasn't too shabby for not being a writer, but I try to stick to just the photography and the short write-ups.
Yeah.
Well, in my opinion, despite the difference in, I shouldn't say years, but experience, You guys are both great photographers. And I'm curious as to is it Wind Falls picture the Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone? With the airplane?
Yes, with the airplane, that's the lower falls, the Grand Canyon.
Is that your flying?
Yeah. And so that was actually a different airplane because 2 weeks after we took the first picture over Grand Prismatic, he wrecked that airplane at the Billings airport and destroyed it, and a guy got hurt, and it was a bad deal. But anyway, we rebuilt that airplane, and we used it in that other picture the next year. Yeah, well, he's really not. So what I do in those situations is I use a really long telephoto lens, which compresses distances, just like a pair of binoculars would. And so he's really not very close to the falls at all. He's actually 2,000 feet above the falls, but I was taking the picture from 16,000 feet. So I have an oxygen system, and it's, over the years, I've had a lot of people ask if they can go along when I'm doing aerial photography, and they only go once because it's really cold, and those flights that I do, like the commercial flights that I do, average between 8 and 9 hours, nonstop. Yeah. So it's miserable up there. It's cold, it's, and the window's open because I never shoot through the plexiglass. So I always shoot just out of either an open window or an open door so that the view is clearer. Yeah.
Never dropped your camera out of the airplane.
So far I have not dropped anything out of an airplane. I've seen some videos online of people that have dropped cell phones, and you got to be super careful. When you're shooting out of an airplane, if the edge of the table here is the side of the airplane, you have to pretend like that's actually a solid surface, because anything that goes beyond that will get taken out. Yeah.
Do you still get chances to terrorize reporters in the airplanes?
Not as much as I used to. I've had I had one young woman in the airplane that was a terrible. We had to go do this story up in Malta, and there was a cold front going through, so it was terribly rough. And I told her she was going to get in the Guinness Book because she threw up 8 times. It was miserable.
Remember one of the old air shows, Gene Soucy had his wife that was a wing walker, and I think you set a camera up on the wing of the plane and shot something over Billings as it was flying. Was that you that did that one?
Yeah,
I think the
I
pilot
didn't
maybe-
set that one up. Somebody else did, but yeah, that was a great picture. Gene Soucy was the best. And what I did once was I talked Denny Lynch into letting me mount a camera on the tail of one of his fire bombers during the Yellowstone fire. And so we built a little mount, and then we duct taped it all on the tail. And I set it up. I ran a wire into the cockpit, and so it was film. Back in the day, it was '88, and I set it up so that all he had to do was throw that switch, and it would take all 36 pictures on the roll just continuously and stop. And so I said, all right, when you start your run, just flip the switch, and and the picture was okay. It was kind of cool. It was the top of this B-26, with this fire off in the background, and he's starting his run on the fire. Well, so I was waiting for him to come back. I'm up here at Lynch Flying Service, and he pulls up, and he gets out of the airplane, and there's all these other fire bomber pilots, and they all come over to him, and they're doing something. They're all in this big group over there. And so I was, back there with a big ladder trying to get my camera off and get the film out of it. And I said, what was going on up front there? And he said, well, we all had bets whether it would be there when I got back. Yeah, Joe.
Well, what kind of story has to take you out of Billings? What's the magnitude? How do you guys determine, whether a story is actually worth traveling for? And is there anywhere that's too far, or is anywhere in the state really open to you going there to shoot it?
Yeah, so from probably Bozeman, we've got other papers in Helena, Butte, Missoula. So from Bozeman. I've done assignments like in Bozeman and then east in during the Bakken boom, east into as far as maybe Williston is probably as far as I've gone just on Gazette assignments. But I've done other assignments for the corporation that owns the newspaper, where I've traveled to like cover the flood on the Mississippi or the Red River flood, and those are all jobs where I just flew the airplane there to do aerials. They had people working on the ground, and so then I just supplied those local newspapers with aerial photography. Well, thank you so much for coming. It's awesome. And if anybody wants to hear Tom Cruise, I'll play that for you, like over here. So.
Thank you again, everybody, for coming out to the show. So we'll let them stick around for a little bit afterwards. Feel free to.
Is it working? Okay, awesome. I just wanted to say that, I'm thankful for the opportunity to, be a part of the newspaper and, have this mentorship with Larry. There are so many things about Billings and about the job that I wouldn't know unless I learned it from him. I mean, it would take me 40 years myself to learn them. So I am just really grateful that, I get this opportunity to learn from Larry and, help document photos for Billings.